Welcome. Let's take a look now at some of the events to watch out for the week starting Monday, the 19th of December. It's the last full week of the year, and we begin with the economic calendar on Monday, the 19th, with the German IFO Business Climate Survey out. It gives a snapshot of what's happening in the German economy and could well be key as we look into interest rate rises coming through, as we're now told by the European Central Bank, in 2023. UK industrial trends orders also out mid-morning, and later on in the day we get the US National House Building Association Market Index out. Gives us a snapshot of what's happening in the UK US property sector. Meanwhile, central banks next week, RBA meeting minutes, and also the BOJ interest rate decision comes in first thing on Tuesday morning, and then later on in the day, German producer prices, Eurozone consumer confidence could be an interesting number to watch out for the euro, and US housing starts, API crude oil inventories, the weekly inventory numbers out from the American Petroleum Institute later on in the day. Sticking with this idea of confidence across the European markets, we get the German GfK consumer confidence number out first thing on Wednesday morning, UK public sector net borrowing, Canadian consumer prices, and US Consumer Board consumer confidence number out mid-afternoon, along with the existing home sales, and then the weekly EIA crude oil inventories. Thursday 22nd, UK third quarter GDP. This is the final number for growth. We've just heard recently the monthly number coming through, which was a surprise uptick, but we are expecting to show that the third quarter has gone negative, which would be the first of the 2 quarters that the OBR is already pricing in as having gone into recession here in the UK. US third quarter GDP numbers as well. That too is a final number for that third quarter period, and also the weekly jobless claims. And rounding off the week, on Friday, the Japanese BOJ minutes of the last meeting and the consumer price index out in Japan. And later on in the day, personal income and spending in the US, along with durable goods, PCE price index, new home sales, and the weekly Baker Hughes oil rig count, taking us into what will then be that long weekend to celebrate Christmas. Let's go now with the chart to watch out for next week. And we're joined by IG's Chief Technical Analyst, Axel Rudolph, who's with us as we look into this last week. I know that as we look into it, of course, we continue to monitor what's happening in terms of some of the trading opportunities, but they're becoming a little bit sparse, I guess, going into the back end of the year. But what's your choice for next week, Axel?
Well, Jeremy, the German IFO Business Climate Index for December, I think, might be adding a little bit of volatility to an already very volatile market. Because if you look at the DAX 40 on the daily chart, it has now formed a top. We had some negative divergence in place, and this has then led to a very sharp fall in the DAX 40 on weaker US data and recessionary fears. So with regards to the week ahead, we could perhaps be sliding all the way to the 55 and 200-day simple moving averages, which are seen around the 13,600 to 572 area. So that is a possibility. And if the business climate index does surprise to the upside, maybe the DAX can hold ahead of these levels and reverse higher. But in that case, we'll have to see whether we could break through the previous support, which is now, because of inverse polarity, become resistance between 14,125 and 192. And basically, as long as that caps, the short-term trend is pointing lower into year-end. But if it were to be taken out to the upside, we could then see a follow-through taking us into higher levels at the end of the year. Because after all, usually if you go back to 1950 and look at statistics, the markets are positive 3 times more often in December than they are negative. Having said that, from a technical perspective, it looks as if the DAX is actually heading lower into year end.
Okay, thanks so much indeed. That's one of the charts to watch out for from the economic calendar. And as you may think, indeed, is going to come to pass next week. We've got a fairly sparse corporate calendar to watch out for, but we do have a couple of days of interest. Let me just quickly run through some of the numbers. On Tuesday, we have General Mills reporting second quarter earnings before the bell. After the bell comes Federal Express with its second quarter figures. And perhaps, certainly for me, I think more than anything else, I'll be looking more about what's happening around Nike on its second quarter earnings. One of the big ones as well coming on Wednesday with an all-session stock, Micron Technology, on its first quarter figures. That's it for the calendar. Let me just go back to Axel and say, as I said earlier on, there's not much to choose from, but the corporate calendar is up and running next week. What are your thoughts on a chart?
Well, it's just, as you've just mentioned, Micron technology might be interesting. And if you look at the daily chart here, I mean, the share price has slid very, very sharply over the last few days and continues to head lower again, back down towards the June lows around the $50 mark. And it'll be interesting to see next week whether we can hold there on these first quarter earnings or not. If not, it's quite likely that we would be heading all the way down to the September lows again, around the $47.15 mark. So quite a lot of downside possibly being in store for the share price here. For a bullish reversal to really take shape, what we would need to do is rise all the way above the 55-day simple moving average, around the $55.36 mark, which looks pretty unlikely at the moment. But there seems to be still a lot of volatility in this sort of stock, and I wouldn't be surprised if that continues on lower volumes next week as well.
Okay, all right, Axel, thanks so much indeed. A look at a couple of charts to keep us going through into that final week before the Christmas and New Year break. Many people, of course, will be off right the way throughout the duration. We will be here for you as we continue to monitor the markets, and we've got all 5 days next week. But in fact, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bringing together our charting 10:30 show and also the early morning call together into one bulletin at 9:30. And I'll be covering those right the way through until Thursday. And Axel will be with you next Friday morning at 9:30. As I say, we've combined those two. And then that pattern remains right the way throughout until the new year. In the meantime, it just remains for me to wish you a happy weekend. And we'll see you first thing Monday morning. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGCom, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.